welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
We have allowed ourselves to become so disconnected and ignorant about something that is as intimate as the food that we eat.
Be prepared to grow your own for victory.
God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-foamed pullets who will stop his mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. So God made a farmer.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornbrough, and this is episode 115, February 18th, 2019, and today we're going to talk about all the dirt on living the good life with author Kirsten Lie-Nielsen. And really, we got a whole bunch of stuff for you today on this show. We're going to quite the variety today. But we're going to be having a chat with her about her book, So You Want to Be a Homesteader, All the Dirt on Living the Good Life. But before we get into that, how about some homestead updates? I'm continuing to do the ear mite treatments on our buck rabbit. He's looking a lot better. And it's here. It's finally arrived. Today I officially started the tomatoes and the peppers from seed for the spring garden, so I'm pretty excited about that. I actually started the onions from seed a couple weeks ago, and they're doing good. I actually just started them in the greenhouse, and I'll be starting the it's a little cool in the greenhouse at night for the tomatoes and the peppers, I think. So I think I'm going to leave them in the house for a couple weeks before I take them out there and bring them in if I have to, if it gets cold anymore. But yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to get this thing rolling. I know it's a little early yet. We're really about 11, 12 weeks before we can really plant into the ground. But I want a really good start on my tomatoes and peppers so I can have some pretty early this year. So I want to get those going at least. So that's what's going on the small town homestead this week. I want to start doing the in the news segment again, homesteading in the news, and I have a couple news segments for you. I wanted to talk about a couple articles I ran across that I think are really, really good, both positive, but positive things for homesteading. And the first one's titled "A Return to a Simpler, Healthier Way of Life. Homesteading expands in the Nashville area." And this article features a couple, or a family rather, that are running a farm, Stony Creek Farm in Franklin, Tennessee. So they're doing lots of cool stuff. They're having classes. I'll put a link to their website in the show notes. Actually, I'll just play a little clip. I'll play just a little bit of there's an audio that goes along with this article, or a little video. I'll play a little bit of the audio from that, about a minute or so of that, and you can check that out.
We actually have, because we're both kind of from the corporate world, we developed a mission statement once we found out what it was that we wanted to do. And the mission statement of Stony Creek Farm is to teach people how to grow their own healthy food without pesticides, and how to use their sustainable resources wisely. And that's the mission of our farm, and everything revolves around that. So there's a huge interest in homesteading and being able to have a freer lifestyle where you're not dependent so much on grocery stores. You can grow your own healthy food without pesticides. And you don't have to depend so much on grocery stores and the money that it takes, because as you've seen over the last few years, well, really over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of change and expense in grocery stores.
So you can see they have a lot going on. Pretty exciting stuff. I mean, I love stories like this. I just love it when homesteading families are taking the initiative to help others get started, to promote the homesteading lifestyle, and to teach others how to do it. And I'll put a link to their website, Stony Creek Farm, in the show notes, and that article as well. So go check that out. Really good stuff. The other article I wanted to talk about was titled "Urban Homesteading Series Helps Bring Nature Home." And this one is from theprogressive.com, and it was from the Chilliwack Progress in British Columbia. And it's the Chilliwack Library programs feature soap making, macrame, and zero waste living. And it's a homesteader from Little Homestead in the Valley. And I'll put their website link in the show notes as well. And they're just teaching lots of cool stuff. And, I think that's great that they're taking advantage of the library there to help others get into homesteading and take on some certain skills, talking about, natural homemade soaps. I mean, that's awesome, that they're taking the initiative to step up and do that they're concerned about zero waste living, and they're trying to promote that and other things as well. So I think that's cool. I'd like to see a whole lot more cities doing that, a lot more individuals taking that opportunity to do that and really making the most out of that, the libraries for promoting homesteading. I think it's really cool. And it's urban homesteading too. I always find that's really cool that folks are taking that initiative with urban homesteading. Hey y'all, let me tell you about a great company I really believe in, and that company is New Society Publishers. Here's why I love this company. Listen to a few things they have in their mission statement. New Society Publishers has been publishing books to build a new society for over 30 years. They are an activist, solutions-oriented publisher focused on bringing you tools for a world of change. New Society Publishers' mission is to publish books that contribute in fundamental ways to building an ecologically sustainable and just society, and to do so with the least possible impact on the environment in a manner that models this vision. Their books are packed with ideas on the cutting edge, analysis that's hard to find, inspiration for daily struggle, and practical tools to change the world. New Society Publishers' work speaks to individuals and organizations interested in changing their lives so that they may change the world for the better. Let me tell you, folks, that's a mission statement I can get behind and support. Also, they've partnered with me to offer a 25% discount on their book titles for those in our membership. If you want to learn more about them and their mission or see their awesome inventory of books, just go to newsociety.com. Well, let's just jump on into our main topic for today, and that's all the dirt on living the good life with author Kirsten Lie-Nielsen. Kirsten is a writer and a farmer from Midcoast Maine, and after starting a small hobby homestead, her endeavors quickly grew to encompass geese, goats, chickens, bees, ducks, and extensive vegetable and herb garden. And as you'll hear, when you start getting all those things, you have to have a little bit more property. She just, she needed more room, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the interview. And she was always intrigued by self-sufficiency and working with her hands. Kirsten enjoys sharing her experiences and the lessons of life on the farm for publications such as Grit, Mother Earth News, Backyard Poultry, and HobbyFarms.com. So she's been out there, promoting this lifestyle, this self-sufficiency lifestyle for quite a while. Kirsten's first book, A Modern Homesteader's Guide to Keeping Geese, was released in October of 2017. And her second title, So You Want to Be a Modern Homesteader, All the Dirt on Living the Good Life, was released in December of 2018. So that was just real recent here, and that's what we're mostly going to talk to her about today. So let's just jump right into that conversation. I know you're going to love it with Kirsten. Kirsten, welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, you've written a couple books, and most recently you wrote one titled, So You Want to Be a Modern Homesteader, All the Dirt on Living the Good Life. Now, that sounds like a controversial title.
Well, I don't know if it's quite all the dirt, but I did try to fit in as much as I could there. And it's certainly meant for it's meant for all different types of folks, but especially for people who are intrigued by living more self-sufficiently, maybe thinking about moving to the country or a more rural lifestyle, and sort of trying to give them an idea of the realities of all the aspects of it instead of just the good stuff, or just the animals or something like that. It's trying to encompass what community is like out here, what it's like heating with wood, so on and so forth, all the different aspects and realities of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say.
Well, that sounds like that's really well needed, because there's a lot of fluff out there that make it look better than it is sometimes. I mean, it's great. I think, homesteading's great, but yeah, it's not all roses, is it?
Certainly, yeah. No, there's certainly the fair share of hardships, and trying to be realistic about that, and especially for people who haven't maybe had animals before, things like that. Trying to give a nice realistic look of everything that I love about it, and why this is how I've chosen to live my life, but at the same time, trying to be realistic at the same time.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, now, I guess I just want to back up a little bit, and, I'm curious how you got to be a modern homesteader? I mean, was this something you had to learn the hard way, that it wasn't all roses and great? Or was you raised this way, or is this something kind of new for you too?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. So I was raised, my parents had an extensive vegetable garden, and they had definitely both ended up where they were through kind of a journey of going back to the land, although by the time I came around, we were not living quite as rurally as they had been previously, but still, very much in connection with the land and understanding, where food comes from, that sort of lifestyle elements of that for sure. But I definitely got away from that as a teenager and into when I was in college. And I ended up, my husband and I were living in a suburb just outside of Bath, Maine. We had about an acre, I think, maybe an acre and a half. And we started with a vegetable garden, and we got a flock of chickens, small flock, like 4 or 5. And then we added geese, which we did somewhat on a whim. My husband's son actually asked if we could get a couple geese, and so we got a couple goslings. We really loved them. We loved how the geese would imprint, and so they follow us around, and they were just, really dedicated friends. We started growing that flock of geese, and actually my first book was the Modern Homesteader's Guide to Keeping Geese. So the geese definitely became a big part of my life. So because of the geese, we quickly outgrew the property that we had, and we'd already talked about moving to a more rural location, but the geese kind of, lit the fire under us that we, needed to make a change. So we found this property in Liberty, Maine, which is a very rural location, and the place that we found was 93 acres. Which had been in the same family for about 200 years, but then about 20, 30 years ago had been more or less abandoned. And so the house and the barn were almost like a time capsule, like they still had the homework on the kitchen table kind of a thing. It was really quite incredible.
Yeah.
And the fields were in definitely sort of like, overgrown, but still at a point that we could bring them back with sort of our hands and a chainsaw instead of having to, bring in heavy equipment.
Yeah.
So the property was like right at the perfect point that we could still work with it, but it was also affordable. And so we embarked on the journey.
Well, how different was that for you from that acre and a half to moving to a property that size? Because that's a huge difference.
It was a huge difference. It was definitely a difference that I was ready for and looking forward to, although there are certainly elements about it that I hadn't considered. But a large part of, besides the geese, a large part of why we wanted to move was privacy. Was, we had neighbors on 3 sides who definitely sort of just looked into our house. And so being in a rural spot was really important, and being in a place where we could sort of do our own thing and have our animals without worrying about them bothering anybody or making too much noise.
Right.
So we wanted to be able to expand in terms of growing crops and getting, larger herds of animals, but we also just wanted the land around us for privacy. So sometimes it's startlingly quiet and you can feel a little isolated, but overall, I mostly think that, mostly it was a good transition, and I was happy that it was that quiet.
Yeah. Well, what kind of animals are you raising now? I mean, you obviously moved on from just chickens and geese. You went on to some bigger animals probably?
Yes, yeah. So at the moment we have, our geese have grown to 2 dozen, so we have quite a full queue. We have chickens, we have guinea fowl as well, which we use to keep the ticks down around here. And then we have a herd of 9 goats at the moment, most of which have been bred, so we have quite a few more goats come through. We have a livestock guardian dog for the goats. And then our latest addition hasn't arrived quite yet, but in April we are getting some pigs. And the pigs are, we've always kind of wanted pigs and talked about it, but we have an area that had been logged, so there's a lot of like large stumpage left to find. So we're putting the pigs in there mostly to clear out the sense and be able to turn that back to pasture as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you definitely drove your neighbors crazy with those guineas and those goats, probably both.
Yes, yeah. We certainly, we opted for some of the noisier animals, it must be said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So obviously, it's like you say, it's not all great. I mean, there are challenges. There is a little dirt on living the good life. So what kind of challenges are there in living that rural life that you would bring out and say, this is something you need to know before you get into this?
I think if you're not used to living in the country, a lot of the sort of unthought of realities might seem obvious to somebody who has grown up or lived in the country for a long time. But there's things like just planning your week and planning if you do need to go to the grocery store or shopping for any reason, like how far of a trip that is. Mm-hmm. And the fact that all those sorts of things, your animals, grain and all those logistical things need to be planned into the week because it's actually a big chunk out of your day. I also was very surprised in moving here. Like I said, at our old property, we had neighbors on all sides, and we were in more close, physical proximity to other people. But here, our relationship with our neighbors is closer. They actually do stop by when they're driving by. They stop by to chat and see what's going on. And that was definitely a surprise. And at first, I don't think I was very happy about it. Because, like I said, privacy was the primary reason. But the more I've gotten used to it and you get to know the people, the more you realize that that's also like a support network, like having people who are checking in on you and having people like emergency services, for example, are quite far away. So having people you can count on just down the road. But definitely the fact that people just stop by to say hi was a surprise for me.
Yeah, isn't that funny how though that they're actually further away, but in a lot of ways you become closer to them. Yeah, it's kind of like the old good fences make great neighbors saying.
Right. And then for us personally, which depending on your situation, if you're, going rural, for us personally, there were a lot of things that we did without, and we sort of made a plan. We knew that the animals and the livestock were kind of the primary focus of the first couple years that we were here. Last year, we focused on the house a bit more, and going forward, we're looking at doing more with the fields and putting in some orchards. Mm-hmm. But the first couple of years, it was really about growing the animals, and particularly the goats were a primary focus. But that meant that all of our time and our resources were going into the barn and the fields, the pasture space. And because of that, we didn't do anything with the house. So we were using a bucket as a composting toilet. And we had an outdoor shower in the summer. And in the winter, we just didn't have showers. But, those sorts of things, it wasn't a surprise for us. We knew it going in, but it was some things are certainly more difficult to live with than you think they are. The idea of it, like, yeah, I can do that, but, the reality of it's a little tougher. And some of those things, not everybody is going to want to make those compromises. So knowing where your priorities are is absolutely important before you sort of jump in with both feet.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you say your kind of next steps, or you wanting to work on the land a little bit more and plant orchards and things like that. I think I read on your website something that you're how to focus on permaculture. Is that something you figure play a huge part in your property? Yeah.
Yeah. Permaculture is a big part, certainly in the animals on our property. The orchards, we're looking at orchards and possibly vineyards as well, sort of mixing a few different things. We don't want to, jump all in on any one plant, but definitely apples, and also elderberries is something we're looking at a lot. We want to do species that are native to Maine as much as possible, because I think that, makes a big difference in their ability to thrive here. Sure. But the permaculture aspect of it really comes into play for us with the animals, because every animal serves a purpose on the farm, even if it isn't like directly that we're going to just eat them. They have, a lot of other useful qualities. So, for example, we decided on goats. Our goats are dairy goats, so the end product, I guess you could say, is milk. but we decided on them because we have a lot of stone walls that are kind of overgrown with brambles, so we can put goats on sections of those walls and get them cleared away.
Yeah.
Like I said, with the pigs, largely they're coming in to clear out these stumps. The guineas are, helping with tick control, and the geese, the helpful aspects of those include their fantastic guardians for both our chickens and our property in general. They're intimidating to a lot of predators, but even if they don't directly chase something away, they sound a really loud alarm so that I can respond. Plus, we also get eggs from the geese, so that's useful. That's helpful as well. But definitely, primarily as like alarm bells and guard animals. So everybody kind of pulls their own weight just by doing what they do naturally, anyways.
That's something I really love about permaculture is just the integration of all things working together to bring about the purpose. And that's something we've been trying to implement on our property a lot. Just every little thing. People don't think about all those little things, like you said, the tick control and just these little things here and there, and it all works together to really carry out the function of your homestead. So I think that's really great.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And I have to say that we got together this past spring, and we didn't see a single tick all summer. So they do their job well.
Yeah. That's why I hear. I remember when when I was a kid, we had guineas, and I just remember how loud they were. That's the one thing I remember about them more than anything. They were crazy loud.
Yeah, they are incredibly loud. Although I have heard, and we have about 24 here, and I have heard that that's actually like the right number, if you will, to have, because a smaller number, they're always looking for more because they have certain roles to fill in the flock. So ironically, the more you have, the quieter they are.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've heard. I haven't had less. So.
and you've got the property. They probably roam all over the place. True. And get
they
away
only
from
bother us. They don't bother anybody else.
Right. Well, you put a huge focus in your book, and even on your website, I've read some things about what a modern homesteader is. Now, that's something I've talked about a lot on this podcast, and I've done whole podcast episodes on what that is. What's your definition of a modern homesteader?
Yeah. So in the introduction of the book, I define a homesteader as someone who chooses to live self-reliantly. And I talk a lot about, when I talk about the book and also in the book itself, about how any steps toward self-reliance really do count. So even if you aren't going country, if you will, is still, if you, put a couple of tomato plants in your backyard, you're still trying to, do something, to be more self-sufficient. But homesteading is such an interesting and such a broad term. I know homesteaders who self-identify that way, who are like, there's people who's totally off-grid, but they also buy all their groceries, or there's people who make everything themselves, but they're totally on the grid. Or, doing everything you can completely by hand, or people who get excited about their new tractor and equipment. So it's like all ranges. And I think it does absolutely all count. Like, I don't want to eliminate any of those groups, because they're all sort of striving towards the goal of, providing more for themselves. So I think it's all good, and I think the end goal is being as self-reliant as possible, and also doing it in a way that you enjoy. I think the joy of it is very important in sustaining it. It's good to have the goal of being self-reliant, but there have to be things about it that jazz you, so that on the days when it seems like too much, you're still, happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to a lot of homesteaders who actually seem to have trouble calling themselves a homesteader. That, well, I'm only gardening, I'm only raising a couple things, I'm only, canning my food. I don't know if I'm a homesteader or not. I'm like, I think I'd probably call you a homesteader.
Yes, absolutely. No, I definitely think that counts. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that there's a lot of people that think that, that they just got this number in their head. I got to have 100 acres and I got to be, completely, self-sufficient and sustainable, or else it just doesn't count. And then again, there's people probably that just have a couple tomato plants that, I don't know, or that's probably just a gardener at that point. But if you're taking other steps towards, building some self-sufficiency in your life, some self-reliance into your life, then I would absolutely, I agree with that 100%.
And often it's not. If you do start with a couple tomato plants, it usually grows. So
yeah. Nobody stops with just a couple plants. It's
right.
contagious as can be, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I imagine you get asked quite a bit from folks who are interested in this kind of lifestyle. What's it take to get started? What do I need to do? I mean, what kind of advice do you have for folks like that?
Yeah, I mean, that is the toughest aspect, and it's definitely the question that I receive the most is like where to begin or how do I begin on a budget. And unfortunately, there isn't any one answer. It's very much individually based. Mm-hmm. But I think primarily deciding like what's most important to you, making sort of lists of what you want to become self-reliant in first. Do you want to start with the garden? Do you want to start with the animals? And what we've done here that has worked very well for us is sort of, and it helps that Maine is very seasonal, so we kind of work mostly in the summers and plan a lot in the winters. Mm-hmm. But, this summer we're focused on the goats, and we're going to we're going to get their pasture space done. We're going to get the milking area done. And writing that down and knowing that is our focus for that year. And yes, that means that we move it to, something else perhaps that year. Maybe the vegetable garden will be a little bit on the back burner, but we know that we're doing that for a reason. We haven't just dropped it. It's, this year we're focusing on this and we want to get it all the way done and then move on to the next thing. And that helps me mentally not feel like I'm leaving something behind, right. Or feel guilty for something that I, haven't completed. So breaking it off into chunks like that, and also long term, it helps you feel like, I won't get it all done this year, but if I look at, what I've got denoted for each summer, then in 5 years, actually, I will have a lot of this done, and I won't be, struggling to keep up quite as much, or at least that's the goal. So long-term goal, a lot of planning.
Yeah, it's so easy to just take on too much too fast and just get overwhelmed, really. And we're probably all homesteaders are probably guilty of that. We want it now, but you really do have to try to limit yourself and just take on one, maybe two things at a time, and just kind of take slow steps and over the years kind of build it until it becomes what you want it to be.
Yeah. And I can't say, I have to admit that's my advice and that's my goal. Every summer I definitely am overwhelmed.
Me too.
On too much. But I still at the end of the summer feel better thinking, I took on too much, so I didn't do that one thing, but I'll do it next year. So you can't, don't give up as well, I guess.
So listeners, do what we say, not what we do.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah, it is easy to do that. Well, I think it sounds like you got a lot of great information in your book that would really help folks who are, especially just getting started, probably more than anything, and early people who are early in the journey. And so I think it'd be a really good book for them to get their hands on.
Yeah, and it is meant, it's, something of, I guess, a primer might be the right word. Like it covers a lot. It doesn't go hugely into depth on any one thing or another, but at the end of each chapter, there is also a little further reading section. So if, one thing in the book or something else really catches your attention and you want to, pursue pig farming or something like that, there's a book at the end of the chapter that'll delve more into that as well. So,
great.
Yeah.
Well, let folks know where they can check out your book, check out what you're doing, and all that stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So my book and my blog, which is sort of a play-by-play of farm life here, is at hostelvalleyliving.com. And I'm also on Instagram, and I do a lot of little book excerpts and tips and tricks kind of a thing on Instagram, and that's also Hostel Valley Living, HOSTILE. So, like angry.
Got it. Yeah, sure. Well, that's great. Well, we'll definitely put those links in the show notes, and I encourage people to go check it out. Like I said, I went over and jumped on there earlier today and was checking things out. You got a great blog, and
thank you.
I gotta get this book. It looks really interesting. I'm really I want to know about all the dirt on living the good life.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like a great book. So, yeah, I definitely encourage folks to check it out and to check out all the things you're doing. It sounds like you got a great place there with some great big plans, and you'll probably be writing a book pretty soon on a guide, Homesteader's Guide to Keeping Pigs and all kinds of other stuff probably pretty soon.
I hope so. I think there's a lot of great adventures down the line, and I do love sharing what I learn, and I hope it's helpful. So I'll definitely be writing more.
Well, good. Well, look, maybe you write another book. You can come back on and tell us about that one.
Absolutely. I hope so.
Well, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Great stuff from Kirsten there. And I will have her website in the show notes, as well as links to her 2 books. So check those out if you're interested. And, I just think she's, a great lady. I love her heart for wanting to share, the homesteading lifestyle. And, even in book form and on her website and such, in her Instagram page and all that. So go check her stuff out. Great interview. Thanks for coming on, Kirsten. Also, we have a new segment, Homestead Recipe of the Week. I talked a little bit about this last week, that you can send in. I'm looking for folks to send in their favorite homestead recipes. And this week's recipe comes in from Ben, and he shares with us how he makes fermented carrots. So take it away, Ben.
My name is Ben Pangi, and I am the host of the Homesteads and Homeschools podcast. You can check out my interview that I did with Harold at homesteadsandhomeschools.com/003. So I wanted to share today a recipe that I've come to really enjoy. It's not an exact recipe, but it is what it is. One of my favorite things to do is to experiment with fermenting vegetables. And as you can imagine, some come out really good and some not so much. One of the ones that I really enjoy fermenting is carrots. We always have lots of carrots, and there's only so much room in the freezer, and I don't really like canned carrots, so it leaves me with a handful of carrots to play around with. And fermenting them is the way to go. So you get yourself a wide mouth mason jar, and you throw in your spices. I really like hot pepper, crushed red pepper, and some garlic cloves. Toss them in there. Mix myself up some brine, about 1 tablespoon to 1 cup of water. And I wash my carrots fairly well and make sure there's no dirt on there, and cut them up halfway into lengths, and maybe sometimes in quarters, depending on how big the carrot is. And then jam them in to your mason jar, right on top of the pepper and the garlic. Carrots will float, but if you jam them in tight enough, the pressure should keep them submerged. So once you have them in there, you dump your water on top. As I said, you make sure that they are submerged. Make sure that they are underwater. You don't want the oxygen getting in there and contaminating things with airborne particulate. If you have a lid, that's probably ideal. Fermentation will create carbon dioxide, and that's heavier than air, so it will sit on top. But if you have a lid, it will prevent any little breezes, any winds, any dust from settling through that carbon dioxide, through that plug, and contaminating your carrots. Now, I don't know exactly how long to tell you to leave them in for. Depending on the weather, the ambient temperatures, if it's warmer outside, they're going to ferment faster. If it's colder outside, they're going to ferment slower. I usually go with anywhere between 3 to 5 days. Keep an eye on them. Watch as the bubbles start coming. Kind of look like you're like a seltzer or a soda in a jar. Not quite as many bubbles, but you see little bubbles coming up here and there. And you can always sample them. Get yourself a clean fork and stab one out, and give them a taste, and you can judge it that way. Once they're fermented to the point where you want them fermented, throw them in the fridge, and that pretty much slows it down. But yeah, you got yourself some nice spicy carrot pickles. They're delicious, and they really are a tasty snack in the summertime. So that's my recipe, lacto-fermented carrots. Try it this year. Your kids probably won't enjoy it any more than canned carrots, but you may. So give it a shot, and who knows, you might find something you really love, or you might have just made yourself a mason jar full of chicken feed. Who knows? You gotta try it. All right, thanks.
Well, as you heard Ben mention, I was actually on his podcast. He just started a podcast a few weeks ago, and I was, I think, the third podcast he done. And I'll put a link to that episode where he and I had a chat about my homesteading journey, and his website also. So go check that stuff out and try some fermented carrots. Those sound great. I mean, we make some fermented carrots, and something he talked about was keeping the carrots down underneath the brine. They actually make little weights for that you can, like, when you put the lid on, it will press the stuff below. When you're fermenting, it'll press it below the brine and make sure it stays there and doesn't float up. Because once you start pulling, he said pull one out, test it. Well, as soon as you pull one or two out, they're going to loosen up. They're going to start floating, like he said. But they actually have some weights for that. I'll tell you what, I'll put a link to those weights that you can put in like mason jars that hold stuff in the brine for an Amazon link for those, so you can check out what I'm talking about there. But you can use anything that's sterile. I mean, I've used like small like dishes, like that'll fit down inside there, like little things like that, some porcelain thing that's really good and clean, anything. But if you have some of those weights, it makes the job a lot easier. So thanks, Ben, for sharing that recipe with us. It's great. You can send in your favorite homestead recipe as well. If you'd like to send in an audio recording, we'd love to have it and add it to the podcast. We want to add one a week to the podcast if we can. And here's how you might do that. Most cell phones usually have a recording app installed so that you could use. I mean, just to keep it simple. And you just, give us your name. If you have something you want to promote, like a website or a Facebook page, you can do that. Say, this is so-and-so from so-and-so, and a recipe I like and want to share with you today is, and then just give us that recipe. And you know what? Maybe you don't have exact measurements, because I'm telling you, in my house, a handful, a dash, and a pinch are official measurements. So if that's what you got to do to say, here's my recipe, that's fine. We'll take it. But try to keep that recording between 1 and 5 minutes. And believe me, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't worry about perfect on this podcast, as you all know. We're friends having a conversation. So you send in your recipe, and we'd love to have it. And when you're done recording it and you're satisfied, and just email it to me at sthomestead@gmail.com, and I'll add it to a future episode. And if you have a website or Facebook page for your homestead, I'll also add links to that in the show notes, so it's a good way to promote what you got going on, though. So look forward to getting more and more recipes. I have one more right now for the next episode, but then after that, we don't have any, so go ahead and send those in. Love to have them. I'm also going to reintroduce the listener question back into the show. Now, I was making whole shows out of listener questions. I'm not going to do that. I want to keep them short and simple, but I will take your questions for the shows. So this week's question comes in from Molly. She sent me this email. She said, "Hi, Harold. I discovered your podcast a few weeks ago, and I've enjoyed listening to your take on homesteading in general, especially on a small scale with small acreage." And she goes on to say, "I just listened to your episode on homesteading on a temporary property." That was episode 101, if anyone wants to check that out, which had some really good ideas. I was wondering if you had any tips or ideas for learning homesteading skills with no property. Now, when I first started reading this, I'm thinking apartment, but that's not what she's talking about. Here, you'll hear in her rest of her question here. For a little background on me, I grew up with a family that did some basic homesteading, huge gardens, some livestock, canning, etc. I felt like I've been trying to get back to that point ever since I left home. For 3 years, I lived in Arkansas and did square foot gardening in raised beds, helped process animals with neighbors, learned to tan hides, discovered fermenting, and the list goes on. Even at an apartment, I had several outlets and learned a lot. For the past year, I've been living on the road. My job as an insurance adjuster does not allow me to stay in one area for longer than a month at a time. It also makes for some very long hours sometimes. Currently, I brew kombucha, and I'm trying to ferment veggies regularly. But lately, I've been a bit frustrated because I can't do a lot of what I would like. My hope is to get a remote position so I'm not traveling quite so much, but nothing is possible for at least another year. So if you have any advice for people in transient lifestyles, I'd love to hear them. Again, I enjoy your show and look forward to listening more. Thanks so much, Molly. Well, Molly, thanks for the question. It's a great question. And congratulations on all the things you have done. I mean, it sounds like you've took some huge steps, even when you were living in an apartment. I mean, you were processing animals and square foot gardening and raised beds and learned to tan hides and fermenting. I mean, that's huge. And you're making kombucha right now and trying to ferment some veggies on the road. I mean, that's pretty awesome, I think. But I do have a couple ideas of things for your unique situation. Because you're in what I would consider a very unique situation, you have some unique opportunities, I think. I don't know if you're traveling like all over the United States, but it sounds like you're in quite a few different places, maybe different zones, different climates, just completely different situation from time to time. I think it's a great opportunity to hone your outdoor skills for foraging, perhaps fishing in your downtime. I mean, you're getting some days off here and there. You can do a lot of fishing. You can get to know the country, get to know the areas of where you're at, and I think foraging would be really, really huge and helpful, and you could really develop some serious skills in that. I also think you're in a great position possibly for visiting farms wherever you're at. When you do have some time off, there are farms that are kind of open to visitors now. A lot of times you want to probably contact them ahead of time and see if you can come hang out, see how they do things, learn a few things, just check out setups and see what they're doing. And it's just amazing how much you can learn doing that. And you might even be able to help out and do some things. They might just let you jump in, get some hands-on experience. And so you might be asking, okay, how do I find farms to do that? Well, if you go to localharvest.org, I'll put a link in the show notes. They have a page for organic farms that you can visit. You just type in a zip code and it gives you a listing of farms in that area that you can contact and then perhaps go visit. So, and like I said, I'll put the link in the show notes for that. And I think that's a great place to start. There might even be some other resources out there for visiting organic farms, that you can go and just check out what they're doing. And just maybe help, maybe not, maybe just observe. And that's pretty cool too, because you can learn a lot doing that. So I think you have a unique opportunity moving around from place to place. And especially because you're staying in places, say a month, you might be able to go to the same farm 2 or 3 times, really get some, hands-on experience on something maybe they're not doing this week or today, but they might be doing in a week or two. And it just opens up some opportunities for you. It also might be a great time to take an online herbal remedies course if that's something that you're interested in. Sounds like you've acquired a lot of good homesteading skills, but I think learning a lot about herbal medication, herbal remedies is a good skill to have, and it could be a really good time for you to be honing that skill and learning some things. Perhaps even take an online permaculture design course. There are a few out there for online study. It could be a great benefit when it does come time to set up your homestead. I'll tell you, a few years ago, homesteading absolutely changed my life. And then a couple years after that, permaculture changed my homestead in a huge way. So permaculture is a real blessing to a homestead. Even if you don't incorporate all the principles of permaculture, just having that knowledge can really open your mind up to a lot of possibilities. So, it's a great time to take an online permaculture design course. So those are just a few simple ideas I have for you that you might consider. If there's some more specific you'd want to know, you can send me another email and we'll try to hone it down a little bit more. But those were just some thoughts that came to my mind that you might be able to do because, some people might actually wish they were in a position like yours so they could take that time to really research and look and study and do some of the things. Now, you say you're working long hours. I'm hoping you're not working like 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, where you don't even have time to visit and forage and do all the things I talked about. But I hope you have some time for that so you can do a few things like that. And you know what? And then maybe in a year, you'll be a lot more better prepared to really get started taking the next steps in your homestead. So hope that helps you and gives you a few ideas. If you want to submit a question for the podcast, you can send your questions to ask@smalltownhomestead.com, or you can call or text in your questions to our voicemail at 765-203-1949, and you can submit questions as often as you like. I'm gonna try to add one to every show. And some of you have sent questions in the past I never got to. I'm gonna look back through some old emails and try to drag up. If I don't get to yours soon, you might resend that. If you sent one that I didn't get to, maybe I skipped over it and just didn't catch it. But I definitely would like to start adding this segment back to the show. So I hope you enjoyed the kind of the variety of today's show. I definitely want to get back to a little bit longer show, a little bit more variety, having you guys involved a little bit more in the making of the show, having recordings and things like that. So please be involved. I think it'll just make it better in every way. If you enjoy this podcast, it's actually made possible by those who help support us. You can do that by joining our Homestead Forum membership community. You can learn more about the benefits of membership by clicking on Become a Member at smalltownhomestead.com in the menu there, and find out about all the great benefits of that. I mean, you get extra bonus podcasts, you have videos. There's a forum there where you can have conversations with other homesteaders, and including me. We have discounts to some things you'd be buying as a homesteader anyway. We have discounts for comfrey. We have discounts for some courses like gardening courses and canning courses and things like that. We have discounts on books. We have a lot of great stuff in there that you can check out. And when you become a member of the Homestead Forum membership community. So if you want to support us, it's a great way to do it. It's about like you'd buy me a cup of coffee once a week for doing a podcast. It's about the kind of money we're talking about here. So it's not expensive, but it goes a long way to helping me put this podcast out and paying for everything that I need to do. You can also support us by shopping through Amazon using our affiliate link. You can just go to the show notes there and you can see a link for that on how to support us that way. It doesn't cost you anything if you're buying things from Amazon anyway, if you start with that link. We also are supported by those who share this podcast with others. The more this podcast grows and the better it does, then of course that makes this podcast possible. And we're also supported, of course, by the companies and individuals who partner with us for advertising, sponsorship, and support through our membership. So we appreciate all those great companies that do that. If you want to find the show notes for this episode, go to smalltownhomestead.com/115. It's episode 115. And remember what Abraham Lincoln said. He said, the greatest fine art of the future will be making a comfortable living from a small piece of land. So take that from old Abe, old honest Abe, and live it out. And thanks for joining me today, folks, and happy homesteading, and God bless.
Thanks for listening. To see the show notes for this podcast or listen to other podcast episodes, go to smalltownhomestead.com. There you can also read our blog, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and take advantage of the many resources we make available to help you along in your homesteading journey. Please share this podcast and help us to carry out our mission of helping others to homestead today for a better tomorrow.